If I gave a fuck what y'all think I would be doing this? Welcome to the FMFU podcast, the podcast that's from me, for us. Vulgar but true, real and never fake. I'm your host, Reese, and I've got a lot of shit on my mind today, so let's get into it. Happy Friday, people, and welcome to another episode of the From Me, For Us podcast. You know, one thing that has been near and dear to me, and one thing that has never let me down probably ever in my life, is the video game. Video games have been a part of my life since as long as I can fucking remember. It's such a distinct part of my life that I can probably actually name every system I've ever owned and at least one memory that goes with it. I remember where it all started, and this is back when I used to live with my grandmother, and I was at a young age, of course, and we had an original Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, the one memory that comes with this is I used to be real close with one of my cousins. And he used to come over all the time. We used to hang out, play the games, get into trouble and shit. And he used to come over all the time. We used to play Duck Hunt. Everybody know Duck Hunt. You know, the game that had the virtual reality gun. You know, you shooting at the ducks, dog laughing at you, whatever. But besides just playing Duck Hunt, our favorite game to play was Super Mario Brothers 3. You know that one. The one where, you know, you get the leaf and it grants you, you know, the raccoon ears and the tail so you can fly for a short period of time if you run really fast. Another thing that brings up a memory about Super Mario 3 when it comes to the original Nintendo is my cousin, and somehow, and I don't know how he knew this shit, and you gotta think about it. I mean, it's amazing because at the time, you know, we didn't have like, you know, game guides or the internet to Google every damn thing or any fucking thing like that. But he had showed me in one of the mini boss castles and also in a separate mushroom world level that there was a secret location to where you can find a whistle so you can whistle yourself to a further world if you wanted to complete the game quickly by getting to world 8. So basically, you know, the whistle helped you in case you got far to, let's say, like world 5. And then, you know, you had to leave to go out with your parents to run errands and you weren't able to save your game because back in them days, wasn't no save games and wasn't no shit like that. Wasn't no memory cards, wasn't nothing. The only alternative thing that you could really do is pause the game and then turn the TV off to keep your save spot. Or else you'd have to start all the way the fuck over, which sucks. I can tell you until this day that I still know exactly where to go and how to get those 2 whistles and those 2 levels. Crazy how the memories work, right? Moving on from the Nintendo though, next system for me was the Sega Genesis. And the Sega was actually one of the things that my dad had actually bought me back in the day when my parents were actually still together. And I remember going to get that motherfucker from Toys R Us. R.I.P. I was a big Sonic the Hedgehog junkie. So, of course, you know, when I was going to get this shit, you know, I was like mad fucking hype. I'm like, oh, I'm about to get my motherfucking first Sega and shit, you know. And then another memory with the Sega, the Genesis was so dope because it had Sonic the Hedgehog, not 1, not 2, but it had number 3, and they also had Sonic and Knuckles. So what you could do is you could take the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge and you could put that into your Genesis system, and then you could stack the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 cartridge on top of that, and it'd be like a combo ultra big fucking game of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the ultimate Sonic Hedgehog game for the Sega. That shit was fucking dope. Let's think about after that. Next, I think, was the Super Nintendo. Yeah, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. That sounds kind of right? But yeah, I had the Genesis, then the Super Nintendo. So Super Nintendo, the memories that come with that, probably my favorite games of Donkey Kong Country. 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of them were dope. And, you know, this is when, you know, a time when you're still young and you kind of learning. And I'm not going to front. This was during the time where I wasn't sure how the concepts of monkeys and swimming actually worked in real life. Like, these niggas would be swimming. You'd have the swimming levels, and, you know, they'd be breathing underwater and shit. And I mean, I'll be real, I'm still curious to this day. Like, can monkeys actually swim underwater like that? Like, I mean, I know they can't breathe, like, you know, in the game because they don't got gills and no shit. But, like, can they swim underwater like how, you know, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong and all them, how they used to do that shit? Who knows? But anyway, Super Nintendo had that. Moving on to the next system I had. Sega fucking Saturn. And honestly, Sega Saturn was probably one of the most disappointing systems to ever be released due to the lack of games, minus Virtual Fighter, Nights into Dreams, and I think they had like a game called, I think it was Sonic Jam, where it had all the original Sonics on it, but it wasn't an original game. I mean, how you gonna have the next Sega and not even have a fucking 3D Sonic the Hedgehog game? Like, you a 32-bit graphic gaming console, one of the first ones to come out, and you're not gonna come out with a 3D Sonic game? That's fucking blasphemous. So Sega kind of tanked it, and this started to be the fall of them as an empire. But after the Sega Saturn came the Nintendo 64. And the Nintendo 64, they made up for the lack of a 3D Sonic game because they blessed us with Super Mario 64.
It's me,
now, this
Mario.
was the fucking game which I showed I was the true GOAT of games, because at the young, humble age of 8 years old, I was able to grab all 120 Power Stars all on my own. And I still could do that shit today.
Here we go!
N64 also introduced me to something I always dreamed of at the time, which Super Smash Brothers was. The idea was incredible. Everything I ever wanted. Who wouldn't want to see Super Mario, Link, and Star Fox fighting each other? The idea at the time was just go. Sometime after that, I think my grandmother, actually on my father's side, actually had surprised me. And then she came through to my grandmother's house, who I was living with, and surprised me with a PlayStation. And then what was so crazy about it is that, like, I never asked for a PlayStation because I knew friends that had it. So I would go to their house and play their PlayStation, and then I would let them come to my house and play the Nintendo 64. But, you know, eventually, I know I probably would have wanted one because I just know how I am. So, you know, it was a real fucking pleasant surprise. And I mean, who doesn't want free fucking gifts? I mean, come on now. That gets anybody excited, especially a little kid. So this is when I got into the PlayStation Ecoverse. This is where the dive into the ecosystem went, and Crash Bandicoot and all that shit began. You know, what's some other dope games for the PlayStation? Too many to fucking name. Metal Gear Solid, Tony Hawk was the shit. Think about times when niggas was actually playing skateboarding games. We didn't fuck with no skateboarding, but you can't tell me you did not fuck with that original Tony Hawk. That shit was the shit. Jet Moto, them games was the shit. And who remembers Spyro the Dragon and Parappa the Rapper? Kick, punch, it's all in the mind. Like, that shit was ill. But one of my other favorites for the original PlayStation was Mortal Kombat Trilogy. I was a big Mortal Kombat guy. So when I found out about Trilogy and how it was going to pretty much have like every fucking character from like all of the Mortal Kombat games, like in every level and everything, like who didn't want that? Like, that shit is great. But I tell you, Jim, you might not even know this. Did you know that the Mortal Kombat Trilogy for PlayStation had way more characters than the Mortal Kombat Trilogy for Nintendo 64? Some of the Mortal Kombat characters from MK2 weren't in the Nintendo 64 version, but they were there in the PlayStation version. Hence one of the reasons why I was glad I finally got one. Jim.
It's the FMFU podcast, bitch.
The sixth generation of consoles came, and now that I think of it, out of the 4 systems in the sixth generation, I actually had 3 of them. And the first one of those was being the Sega Dreamcast. Dreamcast was the shit. A lot of people didn't really get hip to the system or know about it because a lot of people didn't want to buy it. But the big memories of the Dreamcast to me, well, I think one of the first things to stand out, not counting Sonic Adventure 1 or 2, but was the fighting games. And not just any fighting games, but I'm talking about Power Stone and Power Stone 2. Them were the fucking greatest fighting games ever, and I'm still waiting for a Power Stone 3. A lot of people don't really realize that NBA 2K made its debut on the fucking Dreamcast too. Yeah. Yep. It was under Sega Sports. And then they had 2K, the football game, and they had 2K, the NBA game. And a lot of people don't realize that shit started right on the Dreamcast. But going, like I said, with Power Stone, I think those were probably two of the greatest fighting games of all time. And, it is crazy to think back that, like, the history of it. Like, dang, man, like, there was no fucking 2K. Like, 2K started then. Like, it's really some crazy shit. But, even though I was a big Sega guy, because, I had the Genesis, which was a classic. The Saturn I bought. Well, my parents bought, my mother bought, grandmother bought, whoever bought. But the Saturn I had, even though it was a flop, and then the Dreamcast was getting its hype. So we were thinking it's going to be this great fucking system. Dreamcast was great, but it had its flaws. One of its flaws, I think, it was that, the Dreamcast, I think that was the system that was just way ahead of its time. Like, how sometimes timing is everything in life. Like, I think that's what it was with the Dreamcast. Because it was so far ahead of its time, I think that was its biggest downfall. The people weren't ready for what the Dreamcast was capable of doing. Let's think about what the system could do. This is the first system that actually had online play, VMU memory cards with screens that you could play as mini games. So that's similar to like our remote play and different things we do today. And it even had a camera available for attachment. Now, this all sounds like regular shit, but you got to think about it. This is all a big deal of innovation at the time, especially for dropping on September 9th of 1999. Oh, I fucking rhymed. Oh, I rhymed again. That was some good shit, wasn't it? But it's really like we were still using AOL dial-up and shit and modems to plug in. Like, that's the way you connected to the internet. You plugged it into the back of the Dreamcast. So people weren't ready for that. They're like, oh, online game. Like, nobody was really thinking about this shit as being the norm. And this is the fucking system that rolled out the foundation for pretty much what we have going on today. On top of it just being ahead of its time, I think the main issue that probably caused its downfall was that it had a lot of hardware problems. When the rollout happened, a lot of them fucking consoles that came out weren't even reading discs. This happened to me personally. I remember when I first got it, boom, and then I popped in, Sonic Adventure when it came out, and that shit wouldn't load for the life of me. Like, basically, when you put the disc in, it would take you to the screen, like if you didn't enter a disc, and then it gave you all the options, like for your settings, different things like that, and then you'd click play the game. And if you click the button to play the game, it will pop up this message like, doo-doo, and it would say, please insert disc, but it's like the fucking disc was in. So we ended up having to, I told my mother it wasn't working. I showed her. So then we had to take that shit back to one of these local stores we had purchased it from. And then we ended up copping a different one at Toys R Us. RIP. The Toys R Us staff did tell us, though, that some shipments coming from Sega were having issues with reading discs. And shit like this is why Sega just ultimately folded and quit making consoles, because their rollouts and their schematics sucked hedgehog balls. So after the Dreamcast came and ultimately went, I still do have my Dreamcast, by the way. That's just something I'm just never going to give up because of the fighting game. So if anybody want to come over, get that ass beating some Power Stone, let me know. But after I had the Dreamcast and only had a few games for it, and pretty much it came and went as quickly as it, probably took to fucking think of this idea for the system. After the Dreamcast, the greatest selling system of all time, and in my opinion, probably the greatest system of all time for its innovation, arrived in the PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 was so fucking great at the time because this was the first console that introduced backward compatibility to be able to play PS1 games, use PS1 controllers and memory cards, and it was actually the cheapest DVD player on the market at the time when people were still using VHS tapes. DVD player alone, who wouldn't want a PS2? I mean, it did everything you needed, and it was a big innovation because it was a DVD player. Niggas was still playing with tapes, like I said. It's crazy how far time has come along, but getting that PS2 though, not gonna lie, it wasn't an easy grab for me, and I had to give credit to my grandmother with being able to find one for me, because at the time when the PS2s were dropping, them bitches was sold out everywhere. So as soon as like Toys R Us got some in stock, Tuesday morning or anything like that. And I think when I wanted one was around like Christmas time. Like them bitches were going like the exact same day. So my grandmother, being as innovative as she is when she wants to get something, I think that's where I get that from sometimes. She took it back to the old fashioned way and she looked in the newspaper to see if she could find anyone selling one. Like she basically did an online Google search in the newspaper before Google was even a thing. So we ended up finding a guy who had an extra one and he was willing to sell it to us.
It's the FMFU podcast, bitch.
PS2 has way too many memories and the games to name, off the top of my head. But, it introduced me to the 3D world of Grand Theft Auto. Like, I had played Grand Theft Auto a little bit on the original PlayStation, the ones like London and the regular version with the overhead view and shit like that. And, I wasn't really a big fan of it. But when I played Grand Theft Auto 3 over at my nigga Dollar Bill house, oh, it was on after that. I had to have this fucking game. Hell, I'll even tell you one thing here now. I still know pretty much all the rap songs from fucking Game FM radio station. And we gon' give this all that we got. Niggas know that shit if they play that GTA 3. But, this in turn after Grand Theft Auto 3, they spawned, Vice City for the PS2. And then probably the GOAT game for the PS2 because I think this is the best-selling game of all time on the PS2. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The greatest selling PS2 game of all time, CJ. So, to round out the 6th generation console, and which would be my third system, I had gotten a GameCube for my birthday. But in my opinion, the GameCube was Nintendo's first L. And the only game I really played on that was Super Smash Bros. Melee. So we can move on from that quickly. So, the fourth system that I didn't have, it was original Xbox. I've never fucked with Xbox, cockbox. But anyway, but because of my love of the PS2, and getting that original PlayStation a long time ago, that's what put me in the, the Sony, ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, and then, going from the original PlayStation to the PS2. And then, in college, I moved on to the PS3. I remember when I first saw one, I never thought I was going to get one because them bitches was like $600. My nigga Cam, who stayed on my third floor in Harkness Hall in Hampton, he had one. And I remember it was just so dope because fucking controllers was like lightweight as shit. Didn't need batteries. Plug that bitch in with the cord and press the button and it connect. I thought it was so ill. But so eventually in college, I moved on to the PS3. And then nowadays, well, where else you think I'm at? I'm on the best video game console out, which is the PS4. PS4 Pro to be exact. Because, who don't want to take advantage of that 4K TV, right? So, as long-winded as all that was for me to break down, you're probably thinking, what the fuck was the point of all that? So shit, what you trying to brag you had all the games, my nigga? Like, what you trying to say, nigga? Like, I come from the slums, nigga. Nah, I'm not trying to brag at all. But I will say this. Growing up in an only child household, you tend to get a lot more when you don't have to share with, not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven kids in my mama house. Thanks a lot, Mom. But my point is, as I stated, it shows you how the video game has been near and dear to me, and it's something that's just been a part of my life. And probably for a lot of my fellas out there listening and non-listeners, for at least 25 years. So with all of this in mind and how much it has an impact on us as men out here and how I've just pretty much broken down all the history of the game to all of my listeners out there, I have to ask this question. Why in the fuck do these women in our lives have a personal vendetta against us when we play the goddamn video game? It seems like there is a trend that we as men hear a lot when it pertains to the video game. You always play that game. You don't give me enough attention. I don't want to watch you play this shit. Whatever else you can really think of. To all my fellas listening, I'm sure you heard it all before. Now, as knee deep as I just went into the history of video games and me in my life, you would think women would understand that it is something that we as men, we love to do. It's in a way embedded in our DNA, the same way women like to sit on the phone and gossip all day or scroll through their timelines about bullshit celebrity baby news. Think about all the TV shows or movies you watch and what you would see when you watch them. Typically, when you see the working man on TV shows or movies, most men every day or every few days of the week usually do something like this. They might meet with the fellas after work, to go to the bar, to throw back some brews. They might go to a friend's house, for some drinks over there and then do a little bit of gambling, playing some poker. Or they might meet on a sunny Saturday afternoon to go golfing. They might even say they're going golfing because it's sunny out, but they're really going with the fellas to bring the clouds out and make it rain on these hoes, if you know what I'm saying. Why is it such a big deal for us to want to sit on the comfort of our couch or our game chairs and get it in online with our friends on the game and have a good time? I saw this meme one time and it said that women can't stand when men are having fun without them. It's like they catch an instant attitude for no reason, no matter what you're doing. And I think that meme has some truth to it. Women hate when you're having fun without them because they tend to assume the worst. You would think that being in the house and playing the game would be the preference compared to other activities that can happen. What's worse, clowning online on a video game or going out to the club and being out late at night around a bunch of bitches? Ain't no bitches on the video game. You should want your man to shoot these niggas lights out on Call of Duty or dunk on a nigga in 2K. As long as he in the house and taking care of his household duties, that's all that fucking matters. Now, I know some women who's listening probably thinking, well, what about my time? I need attention. I don't want to watch the game when you play that. Well, I got a response to that. I think women need to realize that they like to set up their agendas for their men. What do you mean by that? We set up agendas. I don't do that. You do. So, women pretty much set up weekend plans, weekly plans, whatever it is. And, if us men have other stuff we want to do, whether it be, kicking it with friends, just anything you can think of, etc., we have to work it around the plans they already made for us. If you're in a real relationship, this is typically how things go. Sometimes the stuff they plan for us to do together are activities that us men don't always want to do, or something we will be like, oh yeah, nigga, super hype about doing. But we choose to do it, to be a team player, or, because it's okay, this is an opportunity for us to spend that time. Because not just will it make us happy to spend time with y'all, but it will make you happy to spend time with us. In some cases, though, when these plans get made by women for us, it's trickery because even if you get the option to not go, your best bet is just to go, because even if you don't, even when she said it's okay for you not to go, it's going to turn into a fucking argument close to World War III over nothing. But my point with all that is just saying this. If men are willing to deal with some of the woman's not so fun plans, why can't women pick up the sticks and try one of our activities, aka the video game for once? I think there are many benefits to picking up the sticks and playing games with your man. I actually read an article online and it gave multiple reasonings why couples who game together stay together. A few things that stuck out to me were that it creates another activity to bond over. This is something that shows your man that you're willing to try to be interested in something that he is very interested in, which in comparison is what you want your man to be when it comes to your activities. I mean, if you're talking about whatever gossip going on or whatever TV show, and isn't it more exciting when you can talk to your guy about it and explain it to him and have him actually be into it? Doesn't that excite you more? So if you were to be more into the game and wanting to partake in that activity with your guy, it's going to excite him. So you guys going to both be excited, and that's always a plus. Gaming together also can create more communication. Think about how it is when, and fellas I should say, or any women listening that do play the game. Think about how it is when you play a co-op game, right? And let's say you get really far and let's say you have to beat a super hard boss or something. And this is an Xbox game, even though I'm a PlayStation guy, but I played it with my mans. This game Cuphead on the Xbox. Basically, it's a bunch of bosses and you play with a partner and y'all got to pretty much work together and communicate to kill these bosses. And it's very fun. And you get so goddamn excited after you beat the level because it's so fucking hard. It's like you high-fiving and cheering and shit. Like it really, like it's really like, yeah, nigga, we did that shit. So like something like that. Like think about the dialogue that is there when you're trying to beat his ass and like the communication that has to be there to accomplish the goal that you guys have. Let's think about how the communication is when you got the headset on for some hardcore team deathmatch in Call of Duty. You know, they coming from the left out the bunker on top of the stairs. Man, this nigga laying on his dick. He camping. Spawn flip. Like all of that dialogue in the game translates into other conversations, not necessarily relevant to the game. And you start to talk about other stuff. And that's what usually equals the good time. And this is why fellas who game online are always clowning, because it starts with game communication, but then it turns into old stories, basketball news, whatever the fuck else that comes up. Ladies, think about this. Imagine being able to bond and communicate during those combos about anything, but having fun while doing it. It's fun. And then alternatively, imagine getting good enough in a game where you can say, you know, hey nigga, I'm coming home. You know, loser makes dinner, or let's play for massages, or anything you can think of. Like when you get legit good at the game that you can actually have a chance to make this nigga do what you want him to do, and then just make it a competitive. Like you can legit beat your nigga ass in the game and make his ass go in the kitchen and cook for you. And then he just got to deal with it because we're men. We got egos. Like I'm not going to try to let you whoop my ass, but if you're good enough that you can do it, then that's really going to make me be like, all right, let's see what happens. And then if I'm actually stuck in the kitchen cooking or doing whatever, then that just is what it is. But think about how fun that is. It keeps the competitive drive alive between the two of you, but it's in a fun and a friendly way. So I think these are all very valid, great points to think about. And as a lover of the video game, I think this is great. And this is something that you all out there should think about. And fellas, if you're listening, tell your women these points. Maybe they'll understand it more so they won't complain so much. But I guess just in conclusion, I just think that ladies just got to understand that this gaming shit, it's like a hobby to most men. Like most of the hardcore gamers, they aren't even little kids anymore. Like people are playing video games and making lots of money. Like this shit is more so now for like the fucking adults, especially a lot of the violent games. And it makes sense because all the millennials, we all grew up like with all these different games, all the game systems I named that I had, all these game systems that even if you didn't own them, you at least played them. We all grew up with that. So it's embedded in our DNA to want to play these games. And that's just a part of who we are. So just remember, the game helps us escape from real life. It helps us have a good time with our friends, some that live all over the country. And it can serve as a stress reliever. If that man handles all of his business in the household on a regular, don't nag him. Let him enjoy his game time. Don't make up stuff to try to get his attention when it comes to the game either. Pick up the sticks and learn to play with a nigga. You might actually like it if you try to understand. And if you both enjoy it, it will never feel like a burden to you. Message. Thank you for listening to the FMFU podcast, the podcast that's from me and for us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like and comment, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Also, make sure you get at me on my social media pages. I have a Facebook page, which you can search for From Me For Us, or you can leave it in the status at FMFU_podcast. Also, get at me on Twitter and Instagram at the same @names. That's at FMFU_podcast. Remember, people, always keep it a buck, always keep it 1,000, and perception is everything. I hope you have a nice day. Still fuck y'all.